My son cut me off for 20 years. 20. Entire decades of silence. Not even courtesy of a Merry Christmas. Dad, please die quietly. I sent letters, cards, little gestures. He sent them back unopened, which is impressive, really, because ignoring me took actual effort. Then, as soon as I become rich, poof, like magic. Suddenly I'm invited to Christmas dinner. Family time, he calls it. Oh, family time. Yes, because nothing screams bonding like 2 decades of emotional ghosting followed by a last-minute invite. But don't worry, I had a plan. I turned up at his house with my best jolly old dad smile and said, I have a surprise for you. And oh, their faces lit up like Christmas trees at Harrods. You could practically see the pound sign spinning in their pupils. But then they saw what I'd actually brought, and suddenly we were less home alone and more paranormal activity. Faces pale, smiles gone. And that was before the turkey. But hold on, let's rewind, shall we? Because this story really began with a phone call. The kind of phone call that makes you wish you let it go to voicemail and carried on suffering in peace. There I was, enjoying the quiet monotony of my evening in Lincoln, when the phone rang. A shrill, ugly ring that made me think, ah yes, another telemarketer desperate to sell me double glazing. I almost ignored it. God knows I should have. But fate decided to punish me for still having hope. Dad. That was it. 1 word. 2 syllables. And just like that, 20 years of silence evaporated, replaced by a casual little greeting, as if we'd just spoken last week about being collection day. Nicholas. I said, clutching the receiver like it might sprout fangs. This is unexpected. Cue his nervous laugh. The same one he used as a child whenever he'd been caught nicking biscuits. Yeah, well listen, Christmas is coming up. Melline and I thought, family time. Family time. The words tasted like battery acid. I stared at the old family photo on the table. Nicholas, 8 years old, grinning. Before life and his mother convinced him I was about as useful as a chocolate teapot. A while. I snapped. Nicholas, you haven't returned my calls in 2 decades. Do you remember the birthday cards? The graduation gift? The letters? All of them came back unopened, like a boomerang of disappointment. Oh, Dad, I've been busy, he said, as if juggling Netflix and IKEA furniture assembly for 20 years explained everything. Busy, right? Too busy for your father. But miraculously free the minute my lottery win hit the papers. Because yes, and I said this with the calmness of a man polishing a shotgun, 15 million, front page. Quite the coincidence, the sudden reconnecting. Long pause. The kind of pause where you can actually hear someone thinking of a lie. No, Dad, it's not that, he stammered. We just thought it would be nice to reconnect. You're getting older, I'm getting older. Oh, yes, we're all getting older. Thank you, Dr. Obvious. Where were you when I had heart surgery, Nicholas? Where were you for Christmas after Christmas in this echo chamber of a house? Ah. But now, suddenly we're all about family. But fine, I agreed, because I had a surprise. And nothing says Christmas spirit like weaponizing irony. I hung up the phone with the grace of a man who's just signed up for a bloodbath. Then I stared out at the snow, thinking of the last time I'd seen my son's face. 20 years gone, and yet the wounds were still sharp, tucked away under layers of resignation. The kind of scars you pretend don't exist, until fate rings your phone at dinner time. And of course, as the snow fell, I remembered how it all began. Ah yes, 20 years ago. My wife, Melline, standing in our bedroom, suitcases wide open, like open wounds with wheels. You're pathetic, Stanley, she'd said, sharp as a guillotine. 45 years old, and what do you have? A dead-end job, a mortgage we can't afford, dreams that'll never come true. I'd stood there like an idiot, thinking we were happy, which, in hindsight, was about as accurate as saying Titanic was unsinkable. She laughed. Not the nice kind. More like shattered glass being swept into the bin. Robert treats me like a queen, she sneered. Robert, the one with the BMW and corner office. Robert, who'd probably worn cologne that cost more than my monthly wage. And Nicholas? I asked, like a fool still playing the family first card. He needs stability. He needs a winner for a father. Translation. Robert had a company credit card. I had a loyalty card at Tesco. The divorce was fast, vicious, and about as fair as a three-legged horse race. She walked away with the house, the car, and Nicholas's loyalty, which, let's be honest, wasn't much of a fight. He was 18, old enough to choose, and naturally he chose money, status, and shiny things over dear old dad's midlife crisis and battered kettle. And just like that, I was left with nothing, except, of course, the bitter taste of betrayal and a rental kitchen with wallpaper that should have been outlawed by Geneva Convention. And then 20 years of silence. Until now, 20 years. That's how long my son managed to perfect the art of return to sender. Every birthday card, every Christmas letter, every half-pathetic attempt I made at reminding him I still existed, back through the letterbox as if I tried to send anthrax. Phone calls? Straight to voicemail. Christmas mornings? Picture it. Me, alone with a plate of overcooked Brussels sprouts for company. Utterly magical. I learned to live with it. Of course. One has to. You make peace with the silence. You learn to find joy in small things. A decent book, the neighbor bringing your bin, a crossword you don't entirely botch. But deep down, there's still that whisper, that tiny ember hope, that maybe one day your son will remember the man who taught him to ride a bike, who sat up all night spoon-feeding him medicine when he had pneumonia, who loved him unconditionally even when it was spectacularly inconvenient. And then the lottery. 15 million tax-free. Because apparently even the universe enjoys a plot twist. Bought the ticket on a whim at Casey's General Store, won big, and suddenly, boom, I'm interesting again. Local news, state papers, my face on the bloody front page like Lincoln's answer to Scrooge McDuck. And wouldn't you know it, the phone starts ringing. Old friends crawling out of the woodwork like cockroaches after a spilt pint. Cousins I didn't know I had. Relatives whose only claim to me is they once borrowed a casserole dish in 1987. All desperate to reconnect. Isn't money marvelous? It's basically human catnip. Then came the call. The one I'd been both waiting for and dreading. Nicholas. At last. So I walked over to my desk and pulled out the folder. My pride and joy. Neatly stacked with bank statements, investments, legal papers. Everything to prove that the man they've written off 20 years ago as a failure had quietly been building an empire. You know, just a little light reading to spice up Christmas dinner. Outside, snow fell. Pure, pristine, poetic. I smiled. Oh! I'd given their surprise. All right, just not the one they were salivating for. Because 20 years is a long time to be ignored, and longer still to plan your revenge. Justice, I learned, is best served cold, preferably with turkey. Funny thing is, I hadn't planned any of this. Not at first. After the divorce, when the loneliness had settled into my bones like Lincoln's endless bloody winter, I needed something. Something other than microwave lasagna and long conversations with the kettle. And that's when I discovered I had a gift for numbers. Not just the boring accounting stuff. Oh no. The kind of numbers that build empires out of dust and stubborn spite. It started small. 2008. A foreclosure notice in the paper. Shabby duplex, South Side. Cheap enough to tempt even a man whose most exciting investment until then was a Tesco club card. Everyone else was running from the housing market, like it was on fire. Me? I thought, why not run in? I drove past on my lunch break, squinting at its peeling paint and overgrown garden. It was tragic, but underneath, good bones. Like me, really. Outdated wallpaper. Cracks showing, but still technically standing. That night, I had newspaper clippings spread across the kitchen table, like a detective solving a murder. Mortgage rates, property values, market predictions. It was like Wall Street, but with worse lighting and fewer cigars. The banker looked at me like I'd asked to invest in Beanie Babies. You sure about this, Mr. Brooks? Real estate's dangerous right now. I'm sure, I said, signing the papers with the enthusiasm of a man betting his life savings on a three-legged horse. My heart was pounding, but my hand was steady. The duplex became my passion project. Nights after work, tools rattling in the boot, me fixing leaks, scraping paint, replacing boards. I discovered physical labor is surprisingly therapeutic when you're fueled by bitterness and instant noodles. 6 months later, tenants moved in. Lovely young couple, thrilled to have 4 walls that didn't leak. Their rent covered my mortgage with a smidge left over. I reinvested immediately. Another property, then another. While the world cried recession, I was quietly building my kingdom. By 2015, 12 properties. By 2020, 23. I was still living in the same rental, driving the same Honda, wearing the same Marks and bloody Spencer jumpers. Outwardly, boring. Inwardly, a financial assassin. The lottery win? That was luck. Sure. But it fell on top of everything I had built with sheer bloody-minded determination. And now, I was worth more than Nicholas could possibly imagine. More than Meline would ever believe. Not that belief had ever been her strong suit. Midnight ticked by. The snow stopped. Lincoln sat there in silence, wrapped in white like it was posing for a Christmas card. Tomorrow would bring my chance to prove to them that the man they dismissed as a loser was now something far more dangerous. Successful, bitter, and very well prepared. Did Nicholas know the full extent of what I'd accomplished? Doubtful. In his mind, I was still the pitiful man they'd left behind. But that man was gone, replaced by someone who turned loneliness into power, failure into property portfolios, silence into spreadsheets. I leaned back, listening to the old house creak around me. Christmas Eve was nearly here, and I was ready. The next morning, snow dusted the windows. I was mid-sip with my coffee when the phone rang again. 2 calls in 2 days after 20 years of silence, which, frankly, was suspicious enough to qualify as a biblical miracle. Stanley. Meline's voice, like a cold wind through a broken window. Still that breathy tone she used whenever she wanted something, though now frayed at the edges by age. I hope you don't mind me calling. Nicholas gave me your number. How thoughtful. Like passing round a family heirloom nobody wanted. I know things ended badly, she said. Oh, is that what we're calling it now? But we have a son together. That has to count for something, right? Then she dropped it. Nicholas is in trouble. Stanley. Real trouble. He needs help. And I thought, well, with your recent good fortune. I could hear rustling, whispered voices in the background. And then, faint but unmistakable, Nicholas's voice, drifting to the receiver like a ghost. Ask for more. Tell him it's urgent. I could hear the whispering behind her voice, like a badly written soap opera where no one bothers to mute the mic. What kind of trouble? I asked, all calm and neutral, while my grip on the phone suggested otherwise. Oh, business. The startup world. So volatile. She said like she was describing the weather, as if my son's financial collapse was just a light drizzle. Investors breathing down his neck. If he doesn't come up with the money soon, she let the sentence dangle like bait on a hook. I waited. Always performance with her. I hate to ask, Stanley, but could you help? For old time's sake. Yes, old time sake. The divorce hearings, the insults, the bit where she took the house, the car, and my child. Such warm, fuzzy memories. More whispering. Then deliver with the elegance of a dagger wrapped in tinsel. Say it's for the grandkids' future. It's for the grandkids' future, she parroted, now in full Oscar-winning performance mode. You wouldn't want them to suffer because of business problems, would you? I stared at my coffee, steam curling upwards like it knew the punchline before I did. How many times had I fallen for this trick? Manufactured crisis, crocodile tears, guilt served piping hot. She knew exactly which buttons to push. Shame she'd forgotten I'd changed the control panel. How much? I asked flatly. Well, $200,000 would cover the immediate problems. But if you could stretch to $300, another whisper. Maybe $400, just to be safe. I almost laughed. $400,000. Tossed out as casually as asking me to lend her a cup of sugar. I see. Stanley, I know you're angry about the past, but this is bigger than our problems. This is about family, about doing what's right. What's right? I repeated, rolling the words in my mouth like a fine wine, except it tasted more like vinegar. Tell me, Meline, what was right about 20 years of silence? About returning birthday cards unopened? About teaching Nicholas that his father was nothing more than a stranger? Her voice hardened, the fake tears drying up instantly. That's ancient history. We're talking about now. About your son's future. Not a cent. The words came out so clean, so final. It almost surprised me. What? She sounded genuinely shocked, as though I'd just announced I'd canceled Christmas. Stanley, you can't be serious. You won millions. What's a few $100,000 to help your own son? Not a cent, I repeated. Calm. Final. But you love him. You're his father. How can you just abandon him when he needs you most? I thought of all the years I needed them, of all the times my calls were ignored, letters returned, holidays spent alone. And then I said the only thing that fit. I learned from the best. A sharp inhale. Then the line went dead. Hung up on me, just like the old days. I set the phone down and looked out at the snow. Funny, the silence felt different this time. Not empty. Full of possibility. Full of the knowledge that for once, I'd pass a test. 20 years ago, I'd have written a check. I'd have begged, bribed, bought my way back into their affections. But the man I'd become knew better. Respect cannot be purchased. And love that comes with an invoice is just extortion with better branding. I finished my coffee and started planning my next move. Christmas Eve was still days away, and I had no doubt Nicholas and his mother would try again. Good. Let them. I'd waited 20 years for this. I could wait a few more days. The phone sat there, silent, and I almost wished it would ring again. Each call made my Christmas surprise just a little sweeter, a little more justified. They thought they were playing me. They had no idea who they were really up against. Sleep was impossible that night. By dawn, I knew what I had to do. The morning light stretched across my kitchen floor as I sat with my coffee, staring at the phone. Time for one final test. One last confirmation of what I already suspected. I dialed Nicholas's number. My fingers steady, my heart already cold. Dad! He sounded surprised. Maybe even pleased. That's new. I've been thinking, I said, about what your mother told me yesterday. About your problems. Oh, that! His voice shifted instantly, guarded, cautious. She probably made it sound worse than it is. You know how she worries. I leaned back, watching the wind rattle the window. Actually, Nicholas, I called because I have some problems of my own. A pause. Problems? Financial ones. I let the words hang, savoring the tension. I'm afraid I made some terrible decisions with my lottery winnings. Got caught up in cryptocurrency. You know, Bitcoin, Ethereum, all those shiny digital things. Oh no. But there was no sympathy. Just quick calculation. You could almost hear the cogs grinding as he tried to work out what this meant for him. How bad is it? Pretty bad. Lost most of it in a crash last week. They warned me it was volatile, but I thought I knew better. I paused, letting the lie breathe. Might just have enough left to cover Christmas dinner, but not much more. Silence. The kind where you can hear someone's soul reprogramming. Well, he said finally, his voice colder than a Lincoln blizzard. That's really unfortunate, Dad. I guess these things happen. They do. I waited. A chance for him to offer comfort, to show something resembling care. Anything. Instead, about Christmas. He cleared his throat. Maybe it'd be better if you didn't come this year. You know, with everything you're dealing with, you probably need to focus on your finances. There it was. The mask ripped clean off. I see. So the invitation is off the table. It's just you understand, right? Meline's been planning this big meal. We were counting on, well, anyway, less stress this way. For everyone. Less stress. I nodded to myself. Of course. I wouldn't want to burden you with my presence. Dad, don't be like that. It's just practical. When you get back on your feet, we'll definitely get together. When I get back on my feet, I repeated with a grim smile. Look, I've got a conference call in 5 minutes. We'll talk soon, yeah? The line went dead before I could answer. I set the phone down and stared at the snow-covered street. 20 years of silence, and the second they thought I was broke, it was back to radio silence. Family, yeah? Absolutely priceless, which is fortunate, because they won't be getting a penny. I knew it was coming. Of course I did. Doesn't mean it didn't sting like lemon juice in a paper cut when it finally landed. Not because I was shocked. Oh no. Surprise died in me a long time ago, but because it confirmed everything I already suspected. Love with conditions isn't love. It's a bloody invoice. So, I stood at the window, hand pressed against the cold glass, staring out at my neighbors. Normal people, warming up their cars, shoveling snow, probably moaning about bin collections or soggy Weetabix. People who, I imagine, don't have to audition for their family's affection with a checkbook. Must be nice. The test was done. Verdict delivered. Time for sentencing. I spent the afternoon doing what any responsible father does after being emotionally mugged. A little casual espionage. My old business network coughed up the goods. Turns out Nicholas's shiny little startup wasn't a game changer. It was a bonfire. Brooks Tech Solutions. Even the name sounds like a dodgy IT bloke who takes 3 weeks to fix a printer. Revolutionary software, apparently, delivered nothing but excuses and 200-pound lunches. Investors furious. Nearly $2 million down the drain. Which explains why Mummy Dearest had her hand outstretched like she was at Sunday communion. And Meline? Oh, she'd taken her grift into Broadway territory. Facebook full of weary, tragic selfies. Posts about her battle with cancer. Day 47 of chemo, she wrote. Donations pouring in. Strangers falling over themselves to fund her experimental treatments. Only problem? According to hospital records, the woman's biggest medical crisis was probably an overdone manicure. No chemo, no cancer, not even a dodgy mole removal. I nearly applauded. Nicholas blowing investor money on overpriced sashimi, while Mumsy fakes leukemia for sympathy cash. A mother-son double act. Bonnie and Clyde, but without the charm or the bullets. I compiled it all. Bank records, screenshots, testimonies, a little paper trail of fraud. So neat it could have got me a gold star in school. The irony was gorgeous. Me, the failure, had built a fortune out of dust and discipline. Them? They'd built a house of lies so rickety a stiff breeze could knock it flat. Evening fell, laptop shut, and I allowed myself a moment of smugness. I wasn't the victim anymore. Oh no, I was the author now. And this chapter was about to get delightfully messy. Phone rang. I let it. Because sometimes silence is the loudest sod-off you can give. Next morning, before my coffee even finished brewing, I decided to poke the beast. Nicholas answered on the second ring. Surprised, again. Honestly, I should have charged him for the cardio workout I was giving his poor little heart. I've got good news, I said. Remember those crypto losses? The tragic Bitcoin collapse. He did. Sounded almost cheerful about it, too. Well, I day traded my way back. Bought the dip, rode it up, nearly whole again. Pause. Exactly 3 seconds. I counted. Then, like clockwork. That's fantastic, Dad. I was worried about you. Of course he was. Terribly worried. The way vultures worry about running out of roadkill. So I dangled it. Maybe Christmas is back on? If the invitation still stands. Oh yes, of course it does. Mum will be thrilled. Sure she will. Thrilled like a cat is when you bring home a dog. And then came the real reason for the call. Nicholas shifted gears, voice soft, intimate, oily. Actually, Dad, since you recovered, there's this opportunity. Time sensitive. The kind of deal that could set me up for life. Of course. Nothing says Merry Christmas like your own son trying to sell you snake oil while his mom runs a GoFundMe for an imaginary tumor.